Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the January 21st, 24th hearing of the Milton Zoning Board of Appeals. We're here tonight on the application for the building of a 40B project at 728 Randolph Avenue. I believe the last time we all met here on this project was in early October, perhaps late September. And we've received some recent documents that I'll mention briefly. On January 12th, we received revised site plans with some attachments from the applicant. We also later received landscape plans, a traffic memo, and a signal plan from the applicant. And on, I think this morning, we received a letter from Ms. McKettrick representing the abutters to the property. So it's been a while. Mr. Freeman, why don't you tell us where we are?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and board members. For the record, Peter Freeman, attorney representing the applicant. And we do have our engineer, Deb Keller, here, and also traffic engineer, Jeff Bandini, and Bob Celeberti, the principal of the applicant. So in a nutshell, the reason that we had continued from the last hearing several months ago until now was to give us a chance to see if the town of Milton at its town meeting, which was held in December, would vote to affirmatively allow an access easement or an easement over the so-called access road or dump road that does exist abutting one side of the property. It's where the traffic light is on Randolph Avenue, Route 28. And the town meeting vote was affirmative. And then the town did an RFP, a request for proposals, to comply with 30B, Chapter 30B. And we submitted a proposal in compliance with that. I spoke to the town manager after the submission date, and we submitted, that is my client's LLC, submitted the only proposal. So the town administrator is working with the select board to do the official granting of the easement, and then we'll follow up with the actual easement itself, which will eventually, of course, be recorded, and the easement will give the necessary rights to improve the road, which will be presumably the way the zoning board, we hope, will now approve it. So really mission accomplished in terms of the intent of the continuance and the hope that I'll certainly say we had. So now, as a result, the revised plans that the chairman just referenced were the plans to show in greater detail the access road with improvements and where it comes into the property, and some, I believe, minor site changes to the property itself where the condo building will be. So our intention tonight is to have Deb go through the plans, Jeff to summarize what he sent in. I think that can be brief, but I leave that to Jeff. And just procedurally, Deb mentioned that she unfortunately has another Zoom meeting in another town, may have to leave, I hope after she's done, but she may have to leave briefly for another Zoom meeting with the Conservation Commission. And if we still need her, hopefully she'll be able to come back. So I just wanted to mention that. So unless there are questions from the board now, I think it makes sense to have Deb begin.
Well, I do want to hear from Ms. Keller, and I'm mindful of her other commitments tonight. But before we get there, can we hear from the town? Can we hear from Tim Chawinski about the town's view of this access easement and what it means and all the details? And Tim, sorry to put you on the spot, but if you wouldn't mind spending a couple minutes talking about it.
No. Happy to do it. It's why I'm here. Mr. Freeman, I think, hit all of the high points. We had a special town meeting on December 5th. Town meeting voted to authorize the select board to grant this easement. Mr. Freeman referred to the 30B procurement process. Just like you can't give away an easement without or a property right without a town meeting vote, you also can't do it without going through a procurement process per Massachusetts Chapter 30B. It's all very technical and, quite frankly, pro forma. I think the applicant here is really the only one that was interested and really eligible for the easement per the town meeting vote. But we've gone through that process. Everything is every box is being checked. Town council is in the process of reviewing the response to the RFP that was submitted by the applicant. One thing I'll say is, unfortunately, we are short as a town of a procurement officer. So town council and the town administrator have been kind of splitting those duties. It's taken a little bit of time, but we are in shape to get that RFP accepted by the select board at their next meeting. They're actually meeting right now, but their next meeting will be on February 7th. So we're hoping to have that all sewn up by the next select board meeting. And we're also in the process of, there's a draft easement agreement that Mr. Freeman and town council and the town have been going back and forth on. I have a call scheduled with town council. Well, it's not quite scheduled yet, but I hope it'll be scheduled tomorrow to kind of put the finishing touches on our responses to some of the applicant's edits to that draft agreement. But we should be in good shape for that. So the wheels of municipal government move slowly, but they do move. And so we've got all the pieces in place right now.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Do any of the other board members have any questions for Mr. Chwinski?
What is the character of the land on which the access is going to be used and the easement is going to be granted? Is it a driveway?
That's a good characterization. It's not a way in the sense of like I said, I've said use the Canton Ave or Walnut Street as an example.
Yeah.
It is publicly owned as a driveway. The analogy I use, it's akin to the driveway leading up to Town Hall. It's a public way, people can drive up and down it, but you do need the easement rights to access it from another place or to improve it. So we consider it to be a driveway.
Does the town have plans to ever make it a public way?
I wouldn't necessarily say plans, but it is in the realm of possibility, and it is something that we talk about, especially in relation to the animal shelter. There's a previously zoned for project at the horse farm site. So there's not a ton of development potential on that access road, but there is enough that it is something that I can't say that we wouldn't consider it. And in the course of the town meeting discussion and the discussion around the easement agreement, that has been a concept that's been sort of thrown around that basically if the access road is made into a town way, the easement would be extinguished because you wouldn't really need it. Everyone would be able to have access to it as a town way.
Well, you'd want it to be extinguished for sure. Are the improvements that are proposed consistent with the town's public way standards?
We're still looking at the plans. We've been, kind of focused on making sure that they work for the project right now. I think the way that I'll say that is just like in the case of the planning board doing a subdivision approval, those standards are really up to the permit granting authority to accept or not accept, waive or not waive. So I think it becomes, ultimately, I know you may be asking for the town's advice here, which we'll be happy to provide, but ultimately, I don't want to say that the roadway standards don't matter, but what matters more is the Board of Appeals confidence that the improvements will adequately serve the project and the anticipated traffic that goes in and out.
Yeah, a little bit. I also don't want to be in a situation where we approve a project and the town converts the driveway to a public way, and then the applicant is being asked and potentially object to improving the portion of the public way that's been improved to town road standards. I mean, we ought to do this once, right?
Deb, can you speak on that, please?
Absolutely.
No. I said,
No.
I asked the town the question. Let's see what the
We are-
answer is. When Deb,
It was designed to town standards, sir. So Deb can answer that. you like.
okay, due respect, sir, the question was to the town.
Okay.
So the town can answer it, and when the applicant's piece of the hearing gets, you can be heard, just like
Okay.
every other hearing. Tim, what's the answer?
So the answer is, Jeff, I appreciate you stepping in there, but I do think it's appropriate for the applicant eventually to describe, how they're designing the road compared to the town subdivision standards. Mr. Celebrity has done this a couple times in town. I think he's familiar with those standards. I'll leave it to the board if you want a more kind of thorough evaluation on our part as to how the roadway stacks up to the subdivision standards. We can certainly provide that.
I just don't want to make any. This is the last question, and we can move on. But I feel like there are some details here, and I don't want to make a mistake assuming this is something that it's not.
So one thing that I'll say, and just as a general principle, the amount of traffic generated by this project is more than the traffic that we anticipated going onto this access road prior to this application coming in. Even with the horse farm, potential redevelopment, and this was zoning from 2012, that project is nowhere. It's just zoning that's on the books. Would have generated less traffic than this combined with the animal shelter. So, again, without having gone into great detail as to how it stacks up towards the subdivision standards, if the project can support, if the roadway can support the amount of traffic generated by the project, it will be up to a standard and width and grade that exceeds what the town would have done ordinarily to accommodate the projects that we see in the pipeline in the future.
Okay, no further questions for now.
Okay, so Mr. Gray, do you have any questions?
No, Mr. Mullen addressed mine. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Mr. Freeman, are you able to describe the changes to the site plans and the project as a whole really quickly before Ms. Keller gets into the details? I mean, are we talking about a wholesale revision of this project, or is it the same project with a different access, or
Essentially the same project with a different access. And Deb will go into that. So basically, that's the short answer. And then, the details will be given, I guess, right now by Deb. I mean, the site plan is basically the same. The apartment building or the condo building is not, changed, maybe tweaked, but it's not changed. The basic circulation is the same, other than that now the traffic will come in from the access road, not, on the private right of way. That's the key and, and most important change. But I think it makes sense for Deb to go forward now, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chairman.
it is. Ms. Keller, the floor is yours.
Thank you again. If it's okay, I'll share and I can share the plan.
Yes, please do.
Okay. Oops. So as exactly stated, the main change is really access. So revised plans, again, we went and I think this might be the best one. This is the new layout. So the same building footprint in the same approximate location, shifted slightly to allow for the now access to come off of the access drive parking lot. Primarily the same, adjusted slightly to accommodate the recreational area and dog park along the backside of the parking lot. No access. Now this is not, the existing driveway will not be altered. We are proposing a 24-foot wide road improvement for the full length up to the limit of the easement. Vertical granite curb, one sidewalk, all the way in up along the frontage of the property. The main driveway will come in at this location here, coming up and into the garage, as well as continuing up into the parking lot. We've maintained the number of parking spaces. We've updated the drainage and have provided improvements, drainage improvements. Obviously, since we're putting curbing now on a road that did not have curbing, we have closed drainage to address stormwater runoff on this portion, the improvements along the access road. stormwater for the site stays primarily the same. We have the main infiltration system below the parking area. We have to tie in the existing sidewalk. We do have still a switchback ramp up to tie into access to the garage, ultimately ending up being able to come up through the elevator to the parking lot area in the back. This being the main access for accessibility. Otherwise, access would be from the main driveway, which is proposed at 10%. As the maximum that we had previously discussed coming up to the driveway, and the parking lot is at 1.5 to 2% grade within the parking lot. There are a few retaining walls that were adjusted according to the new layout. We have one along the lower portion or southerly portion of the parking area here, and one up in the northwesterly corner along this property line here. Other than that, all the other retaining walls have been removed from the project. I think that's a brief summary. Looking to see if we, utilities then would now come and service the proposed project through the access road rather than up through the existing driveway. The goal was not to alter the existing driveway whatsoever. We are proposing a secondary gated, right at the moment, gated access down to the driveway, and that was for emergency purposes only, to provide that secondary access if wanted and needed. I think that covers all of the changes. With respect to, I would defer to Jeff Bandini with regards to the improvements for the signal. We do have some updates to the looping that would come below the access road coming towards the light, and those would all be, I would imagine, to adjust that lighting so that you can account for that at that traffic signal.
So we can go to Jeff Bandini, if that's okay with the board.
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks, Ms. Keller.
Thank you. I can stop sharing unless Jeff would like the plan to stay up.
Yeah, that would be beneficial.
Okay.
Thanks, Deb, and thank you to the members of the board. Again, as you know, for the record, Jeff Bandini, project manager with McMahon Associates. So as Deb mentioned, we provided some updated traffic materials related to the change in access to the project, mostly related to vehicles no longer accessing Route 28 directly. We understood the board's concerns with that. You know, we've provided some updates to the materials based on that proposed access modification. So essentially what we did was we looked at how the traffic volumes and operations would be modified by changing the proposed access from that direct previously proposed route onto Route 28 to the access road. And in doing so, we used a lot of the methodology for consistency purposes that we provided in the original traffic study. You know, same traffic counts, you know, same trip generation, same trip distribution. The only thing that we wanted to modify for that consistency is that now all the vehicles will be entering and exiting via the access road, providing that access to the property directly off the north side. So we also looked at the operations at the signal, given that that proposed new volume, and looked at how those operations would fare as a result of those volumes being rerouted from Route 28 side to the access road side. So basically what we discovered was the signal currently operates in 3 phases as we've known previously, but just to reiterate, Route 28 operates as its own phase. The access road and Reed Street actually share a phase, so those 2 approaches get called simultaneously. And there's also an existing exclusive pedestrian phase out there, which I think will be good moving forward for any sort of pedestrian activity that may be in the area as a result of this project. So our results basically summarize that the intersection works at a level of service A now. It's the best letter grade you can get. It's graded A through F. It operates as an A now, and we would anticipate that the intersection would continue to operate at a level of service A, again, because the proposed traffic that would access via the access road would be serviced at the same time that Reed Street gets serviced now. So a car comes up to the Reed Street approach at the signal identifies that there's a vehicle there, and that phase gets called. The same thing would happen if there was a vehicle simultaneously exiting the access road at the same time. So there is no additional time needed to service that phase. That phase is being serviced regardless. There are a few times where the access road would be sort of the main component behind getting the vehicle call at that location. However, given the balance of volumes and the balance of timing at that intersection, we anticipate that the intersection will continue to operate a level of service A with the project trips in place. We also performed a site visit back on December 12th to investigate the existing signal equipment to identify if there was any changes that we would propose as part of this modification. As Deb mentioned, the existing detection on access road is fully functional. However, we would recommend that, due to the proposed resurfacing on the access road as part of this project, that we would cut and replace those loops and map those correctly to the signal controller. The existing exclusive phase that I mentioned is fully operational. There would be no modifications needed at this time. And we would just, in so dealing with the Mass DOT process, we would recommend that an existing loop on Route 28 for the southbound approach be included to the controller, because right now that loop appears to not call the proper phase. Right now that there's a phase instituted for a southbound left turn, but we have reason to believe that the reason why that phase is not properly functional at this time is because of the existing gate. The signal doesn't want to send protected movements into a location that has an existing gate. So, considering that gate to be removed to provide access to this project, we would, coordinate with Mass DOT directly to get that loop as part of the signal. And the final thing was just addressing the issue with the proposed site distance coming out of the new proposed site driveway. I know that we had discussed that quite extensively during our previous iteration. We wanted to identify if there were any, potential issues with site distance related to projects turning from Route 28 onto the access road and any issues with vehicles exiting the access road. Exiting the site driveway into the access road. And so we measured those in the field, given the proposed location of the driveway. We identified the site distance metrics using a 25-mile-an-hour considered speed, which is consistent with the town-wide statute of 25 miles an hour. And the stopping site distance shown approaching the driveway exceeds the AASHTO requirement. And for vehicles exiting the proposed driveway, the intersection site distance exceeds the AASHTO recommendation for that 25-mile-an-hour speed. So I think given all the proposed changes, I think this site and this access works well, considering some of the feedback we've received previously. And, given the favorable level of service at the intersection and some of the improvements that we're showing along the access road, I think this is overall a favorable outcome from a transportation perspective.
Thank you, Jeff. So that's really what we wanted to present. I'm sure there are questions and then next steps forward. But Rob, unless you wanted to add anything else, I think that covers what we wanted to present. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Freeman. Thanks, Mr. Bandini. I don't have any questions for the applicant at this time. I have some other matters that I think need to be addressed, but before we get there, let me ask Mr. Gray and Mr. Mullen if they have any questions for the applicant.
I wonder if you might speak to the landscaping plan.
Yes, I apologize. We do have a revised landscaping plan. Get back down to it. Oops. So again, we're proposing the street trees along the access road, various plantings around the building along the access drive as discussed, and the buffer along the back, the north and westerly limits of the work, as well as within the landscaping island in the front of the building. So very similar to what we had prior.
So thank you. Is that a sidewalk on the north side, right? That's what you said?
Yes,
Is that
yes,
accessible?
yes, yes. So
What's
it
the
follows
grade?
the topography of the road, which is what it can do, and then up into the switchback here, making it into the garage, making it an accessible route.
Is there signage proposed to and from the access road? You know,
Yes, actually, I apologize. I didn't mention that, but we do have additional signage proposed along Randolph Ave as well as on the access drive to indicate that people would have to turn to enter the access road to enter the site. Yes.
so there'd be a sign on the northbound that say, I don't know what it would say. What would it say?
We both say direction. It says post 200 feet, both direct Randolph Ave intersection. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Deb, my apologies. I meant
Yeah.
to mention, sorry about that. I meant to mention the wayfinding signage would be part of our recommendations. You know, obviously for drivers that are unfamiliar with the access road being utilized fully by a property that relies on the access road for sole access, we would recommend installation of wayfinding signage along Route 28 to alert drivers that that's how you access the property. We certainly wouldn't want somebody intending to access the property and not being quite sure how to do so. So we provided some feedback to Deb, and that information was included on the site.
I really can't read that. What is that what the sign would say?
No, I'm just noting that the way signs would
I
be
see.
posted on there. I believe the notations were in the site signage plan that you
Yeah.
had, Jeff, but I can add those. I'm happy to add those to the plan set if that's helpful.
I mean, it's interesting in whether or not it would be MUTCD compliant.
Yes.
So it would be tricky as to how that gets signed because of that. And then my other question is, exiting the access road, would you recommend no turn on red, no right on red?
I can address that. That's a good question. Yes, we did include a no turn on red provision for that for sightline purposes. You know, we want to make sure that, you know, in looking at the existing approach, there is some vegetation along that sight line, which the proponent does not control. So we would recommend a no turn on red provision at that location based on some feedback that we've received from Mass DOT on some other projects. They have recommended no turn on red at a lot of locations for pedestrian safety purposes.
Yeah.
So given the favorable existing and proposed level of service at this location, we would choose to take the path to include no turn on red provisions at this location.
What's the length of the phase exiting, Jeff?
It's fairly short. I can look that up for you. Yeah, and again, it's speaks to the relatively low volume.
It's not the volume. It's not the volume exiting. It's the speed with which the car is climbing the hill that I'm concerned about. So I think the no turn on red should be a requirement, you know?
Okay.
I think I could speak for the whole board, in fact, the whole town, about the concern of traffic on Randolph Avenue.
Yeah, and we anticipated that. That's why when we provided the update to our level of service, we did include that provision in our analysis.
Did anybody speak to the Postal Service?
Yes, I did. We did.
And what did they say? Where is the mailbox now?
It's the same location.
It's right here.
Got up by the building.
Yep.
So they're now willing to go all the way into there?
Yes, they're willing to go into the site. Yeah.
And did did anybody speak to the fire chief about the length of the dead end and compliance with the planning board's regulations on that? Maybe a question for Tim.
Yeah, I'll just speak quickly. I don't know if Deb had a chance yet to show the revised plan, every aspect to the chief. I think there was some discussion. I think maybe Tim last week with Sean also. We met before this hearing with Sean Ridden and Tim. Actually, Tim was busy, so Josh in the planning department. So we know that we have to run it by the fire department, and we're going to do that. Whether there has been any preliminary discussion between either Deb and the fire department or Tim, I'm not sure.
I have not as of today.
I'll forward the plans to the fire department, this week to get their comments.
Would you not generally see a cul-de-sac at the end of the dead end to permit the fire truck to turn without entering onto the property? Given the length of this dead end? Given the length of the driveway? In other words, it's consistent with my comment about how this, despite the fact that it's a driveway, it does seem to me, and I think it's going to present itself as if it were a public way. That seems to me to be the right approach. But that also requires that I think, that you comply with the planning board's regulations regarding the length and treatment of dead ends in the town.
Well, to that point, a couple of things. From the pragmatic viewpoint, that's one of the things in terms of the sufficiency of the access that will be discussed with the fire department. I think the intent, and Deb, you can expand or correct me, it's designed so that the fire trucks can come onto the site and would have a space. I believe it's a place to turn around. And Deb can show that. And then the other point,
I saw that.
And the other point is, without being in any way presumptuous about review of waivers, we realize that we will probably have to, supplement the list of waiver requests. And if we need to get if there is a requirement that you mentioned, such as the length of a dead end and a cul-de-sac, then, we presumably would ask for a waiver. We think it's perfectly preferable to the way it is now, but we'll address that.
Well, it may be preferable, but I think you ought to make an attempt to comply if it's required. I don't know that it's required, but I do know there's a limitation on the length of the dead end and the treatment of the cul-de-sac so that the fire apparatus can turn. So
we'll look into it. We'll talk to the chief.
All right. No further questions right now. Jeff.
My apologies. I do have to step off for a moment.
Okay, Deb, we understand.
I appreciate you letting me do that.
Thanks, Deb. Sean, have you had a chance to, it sounds like you've had a chance to look at some of these plans. Have you had a chance to look at these, review them? And I don't know if you have any comment to make here tonight or in a future meeting, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I did, as Peter Freeman said, we did have a chance to review the plans pretty thoroughly and to have a meeting with the applicant and their engineers. Our intent is to review them to the same level we've done in the past and issue a written comment letter to the board addressing the full gamut of issues. But my immediate takeaway is, so much of the problems that we were dealing with before, fell away with this new access scenario. So, I would say 90% of our issues all dealt with the issues related to that access. So we're left with a series of sort of, I'd consider relatively minor issues in comparison to what we were dealing with before, all of which are readily solvable. The key thing to remember is that intersection is a DOT intersection. So regardless of what we ask for, it's going to still fall to DOT to sort of dictate what's going to happen out there. Part of what came up in our meeting the other day with the new access, there's some new opportunity as well. So Deb and the applicant and I talked about potential changes to the parking that could reduce the size of the parking lot and give a bit more relief to the neighbors. Some other minor issues too, but all stuff that we're planning on addressing in the coming days.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Sean. And speaking of the neighbors, Marion, I know that you submitted a letter this morning, and do you have anything that you want to say on this application?
Yes, thank you. We did submit a letter, and I'm going to summarize it. I don't know if everyone's had a chance to read it, but it's primarily about landscaping. We did say at the beginning of the letter, I represent John and Mary Driscoll. This is the access that they very much prefer. So just as you said, in referring to traffic issues, a lot of the really difficult issues we've talked about in all the hearings before this one, a lot of them are improved or go away because of this access. I want to talk about landscaping. This plan, of course, has some new landscaping because you're now accessing by the access road. In some respects, the landscaping is exactly the same, and that is along the Driscoll lot line, closest to their house, and that is that it's still a single row of arborvitae. We have asked a number of times that the applicant create at least a double row of arborvitae, not arborvitae, but evergreens and bushes. I think the Driscolls are on tonight, so when I finish, I'm going to ask John Driscoll. He had a suggestion for a type of evergreen. Again, we can talk about this outside the meeting, but we have not had that opportunity. And I want to make the point to the board that there's no reason why a little bit more screening can't be provided, or even a significantly, not necessarily so much wider, but a better type of screening. Arborvitae is sort of the standard. It's always suggested as edge screening. A ton of arborvitaes in Milton died during the drought last summer. That's my own observation. I also think there are other evergreens that are just more interesting and more varied. So what I noticed when I looked at this plan was that you have the applicant proposing to plant street trees all along the right side of the access road, which is expensive. I think there are at least 14 silver birch trees. That's already a wooded area, natural area. It's never going to be changed, or if some amazing thing happened in the future, it's a town land. I don't see the need for any street trees. I mean, it's like planting street trees along the Fowl Meadow access, which was done years ago by MWRA. There are plenty of trees already there. And instead of spending all that money planting street trees on the right side of the access road, put some of that money into doing a better screening landscaping plan along the lot line for the Driscolls. You have a landscaping company that has prepared this plan, and they will have suggestions. I'm not sure, the significance of the other point we made in our letter, but normally in Milton, any new development application has to use primarily native species of trees. Street trees are supposed to be native species, and they're, if they're on a public way, they're approved by the town's Street Tree Advisory Committee. So they have a list of native trees, and the planning board normally asks a developer to look at that list and pick from those trees. Doesn't necessarily mean the Board of Appeals should require that every tree be native vegetation. Maybe they don't think it's that important. I think might be up to the Board of Appeals, but none of the trees on this plan are native species as far as I can tell. Silver birch aren't, at least they're not on the street tree list. That's my only source of information. So maybe there should be some reconsideration of the specific types of trees, but they're nice, interesting trees that have been chosen for the street, along the street and within the development. Our primary concern is the vegetation along the lot line with the Driscolls. It just hasn't changed at all. And with all of these other problems being improved, I think it's time to spend a little bit of more attention on that issue. It's kind of, we've asked consistently for more attention to that screening. I think it's been mentioned by your peer reviewers. Remember, the parking lot is right next to the Driscolls' land. Their dumpster now is closer to the Driscoll land. And so the screening is quite important. I'm sure that the lighting will be shielded, and we've already seen plans. We're not asking for changes in any of those things. We're asking that your reviewers look at this vegetation, that you talk to your landscaping company and ask them if they can't do something with, we're talking about, double row of bushes and trees with variation in the types of vegetation, instead of just a single row of arborvitae, which is, susceptible to some of them ending up being dead in 3 years and brown, and they're just not going to look good. So that's the gist of the letter that I sent. The board will have a chance to review it. It didn't get the landscaping plan until very recently. That's why this letter came in this late. And I just asked the chair if he could see if John Driscoll's on this hearing, and if he is, I think there was one type of evergreen he wanted to suggest that would be a good choice.
Yeah, I'll ask Crystal if she can tell if John Driscoll is on, and if so, if you could promote him. While we're waiting for that, I mean, I'll say I think I share the Driscoll's perspective on this. You know, especially given the proximity of this site to the Blue Hills and the fact that there could be future development down this road. I think the appearance of the greenery and wildlife is really important, and not to mention the concerns that the Driscolls have as abutters. And so, I don't know, Mr. Freeman, is that something? Is what Ms. McKettrick said something that the applicant is willing to consider?
Rob can answer, but also.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So just to comment on
ahead.
a couple of things. We're not proposing any birch trees. I'm not sure, maybe some disconnect from the previous plans, but all the trees, our planting list, all the trees and the screening are approved by the planning board. Those are trees that have been approved for street trees by the town of Milton. I know that because I've experience with that. So there's no birch on the plan, but where I haven't read your plan about additional screening. We'll take a look at that and take it under advisement.
The silver maple trees, I'm sorry, I misspoke.
Yeah, the maples are approved by the town, so. But
And
if there is a
when you say-
different species of trees that that the town would like to use, we'll consider it, sure.
What about the general concern about a single row of arborvitaes versus a deeper barrier between the two properties made up of something more varied?
Could, but if the object,
I want to reassure Mary and McKettrick, you're very well spoken as always, and I appreciate it. And it makes sense. What you said makes sense. I can't guarantee anything, but you already heard Rob jump in at the beginning. Yes, I'll make a point of making sure that we talk about revisions, talk with you, and get plans to you in advance, for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, let me ask my fellow board members if you have any other questions for any of those who have spoken tonight before I turn this over to the public.
Not at this time, thanks.
Okay, Mr. Mullen.
I have several comments and feedback, but I'm happy to wait for the public session, and then we could do it at the end, whatever you prefer.
Sure, let's do that. So I don't know, Crystal, if anyone has their hand raised or if anybody's indicated that they would like to be heard.
There is John Driscoll. I'm going to move him over right now.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Driscoll, you're on the air.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to thank Mrs. McGettrick, because I think her letter was one of the driving forces to get this road to be used. And I just want to thank her, and it changed this whole project. That it's going to be we're going to be able to tolerate. And I got some advice from a bunch of people that I know they're, in the landscape. The green giant arborvitaes would be the best on my property line. They grow fast, and the deer don't get at them, and the branches are a lot thicker, so they don't give out in the snow. But I'd like a 12-footer, not like a 5 or 6. I would like to have like a 12-footer, start at that height. But here's another question. What would stop this applicant from being able to sell this project after this all gets approved? Can this be sold with the approval of Board of Appeals?
I'm afraid that I don't think we can answer that question for you. You might want to pose that to Ms. McKettrick.
All right, thank you.
At some other point.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Driscoll. We appreciate your comments. Okay, if that's if there are no other members of the public asking to speak, then Mr. Mullen, we'll turn back to you.
So I think this is much improved, and I think we've made some pretty good progress here. So thank you. I'm interested in and some of this is directed to Tim, I think we've got to get some town feedback. I'm interested in the town feedback on the way the signal works. I understand it's a DOT signal, but I'd like to hear the town say that they think it'll work. I think this could be a little bit tricky on the signage. And I think we should pay particular attention, not just to entering the site, but also exiting the site and announcing that to the user that they're about to enter into a residential area or residential development. I don't know exactly how to do it, but I'd like to see a signage plan, and I think a signage plan should be part of the project because this is not your average driveway. So I'm not saying that people are objecting to that, but I didn't see that. So I would just urge people to pay particular attention to the signs both on the state highway and on the driveway. I think in general, the driveway ought to present itself as if to the uninitiated, it really is a public way. I think that's what I heard, but I think it's just easier to say that. In other words, I don't actually care what the design is. If somebody says it's going to be, the driveway is for the entire length till it gets to the applicant's property, it's going to be as if it were a public way, then I understand that the town standards are being adhered to. If that's not the case, then we ought to know it. And that would include the presentation of signage too, because I think technically they wouldn't have to do signage there, but that's another issue. And then lastly, I want to agree on the treatment of the south side. Well, let me just say another comment about the public way. I'm particularly interested in the public realm. So the width of that sidewalk, the street trees on the north side, I think that's all important. I don't think the street trees on the south side are important at all because of the Blue Hills and the point that Ms. McKettrick said. So I would urge that the improvements there be redeployed elsewhere to make the project a better project. And then lastly, I'd be interested in the technical evaluation of the need for the secondary access and how that's designed and how frequently we think that would be used. How that's actually presented, But other than that, it looks like a lot of good work's been done here.
Jeff, if I can just chime in there, we'll get some detailed comments from the DPW director and the fire chief regarding all those issues, particularly the signal. We'll want to make sure, as you said, that works how the applicant anticipates it's going to work. So we'll get moving on getting comments to the board from those officials.
Tim, I guess my view of it is in a world where we're not building a lot more roads, that this could be a pretty key access road for the town sometime in the future, and we ought to be treating it that way.
Understood.
If I could add one thing and answer a couple of your questions. The traffic memorandum that Jeff from McMahon prepared didn't make its way to the plan, but we'll include a signage plan. The two signs are approximately 66 inches by 42, Mass DOT approved, and they state 728 Randolph Ave, next signal with an arrow. So one on the north side of Route 28, one on the south side. Additional signage that we'll have the 25 miles per hour signage proposed along the access road. That's another recommendation by McMahon.
25?
25.
25.
I don't know. That feels a little heavy to me. I don't know. I'm not the engineer, but on the access road itself?
Yeah, Jeff, do you want to speak on that?
Yeah, that was just for consistency with the townwide speed limit of 25 miles an hour. I mean, clearly if the town or the design of the roadway, if the town wanted to provide a statute that was lower than that to limit speeds, we would certainly be open to that.
I'd be interested in that.
Okay. Understood. Thanks.
Only because, I know I said it ought to present itself like a public way, but it's not a public way. And it's only providing access to one property, right? And it's one lane in each direction. What's the lane width?
It's a 24-foot road, so
So
12.
it's 12s?
Yeah.
In the sidewalks in addition to that?
Correct. Curbing sidewalk.
Yeah.
Meets the planning board, roadway standards, street trees, all that stuff, lighting, all that. The other comment was the parking lot and the second means of egress. So that fire gate that we proposed there, it came up in our discussions with the fire department, and it's not required. I mean, we don't need a second means of egress. It's not required, but we have an NFPA turnaround in the parking lot previously approved by the fire department, which has remained in place. But it was the discussions with the chief that, if this access was given, that he wanted us to propose a fire gate in that location.
Yeah.
So that's why it's shown.
I'm not urging that. I did see that, and I know that the engineer spoke to that. I think it would be good to discourage access through that secondary access to eliminate confusion between people and their destination. That's all. That was why I was interested in how that was used.
Yeah, it may create some more issues that it may not be able to use, because that grade for that existing gravel road or existing road is 16.5% or so.
Yeah.
So, and already went through down the path of, the minimum that they require is 10 and all that. So
yeah,
that'd be a good point.
Sorry, I was going to interrupt you, Jeff. I didn't know if you had any more comments.
No, I'm all set, Mr. Chair. Sorry.
I have two questions. I'm sure I'll have more after hearing from Mr. Reardon in our next meeting. One is there going to be a sign advertising the name of the property? Welcome to whatever the name of the development ends up being. And if so, where is that going to be?
Right now, we do not have a sign.
Okay.
Because, there was talks in the future that this road may be, proposed as a public way. So
yeah, I mean, that was my concern. So
yeah,
that makes sense.
We wanted to eliminate that. So we'd have the signage proposed. We'll get it on the plan so you can see it with the signage plan of the, for the vehicles going onto the access road, but we do not have like a big sign on the entrance of the access road.
Thank you very much. And then secondly, school buses. This is going to be, this was an issue during the original design, and I was wondering if you had spoken to anybody about how school buses will pick up children who live in the project.
I haven't yet, but we will. That's one of the things to do.
Okay. Mr. Gray, I may have cut you off. I don't know if you have any comments or questions.
Not really, just to say that I think this is a much improved project with the town granting the access to the access road. It does alleviate a lot of the concerns that I had. I think I look forward to hearing Mr. Reardon's comment letter and seeing the final version of the plan. But I don't have any further questions.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, I mean, Mr. Freeman, my thinking is that we let Mr. Reardon do his work and get a report back to us. I think that you and your client have some work to do too, and maybe we can schedule another meeting or two to take this back up again.
Yes, I agree. We know what we will do and work with everybody, and that would be fine. Thank you.
Sean, what do you think you need to turn something around?
Say 10 days to 2 weeks. The reason for that is there are a couple opportunities that I mentioned earlier that I'd like to be able to sort of run to ground a little bit with Deb. Opportunities to reduce the size of the pavement, pull the parking lot a little further away from the Driscoll's property. So some things that can be positive benefits, but need to be worked through.
Okay. I mean, that's fine with me. Maybe I'll ask Crystal if there's a date 2 to 3 weeks out that we could start looking at.
Sure. So the week of, let's see, that would bring us to the week of the 6th, or
I think the week of the 13th would be.
the 13th. We could do Thursday, the 16th.
I cannot do the 16th. Today is
Yeah.
a Tuesday. Is it possible to do it on Tuesday, the 14th?
I cannot be there on the 14th. The 13th and the 15th are already taken.
What about the following week, the school
That's-
vacation week?
Yeah, that's school break.
I know, and we appreciate very much having our hearings being exclusively us, but how packed are your agendas on those other days, the week of the 13th, if it's possible, with your understanding to have it one of those days?
Well, first of all, let me say that even though it's school vacation week, that means unfortunately nothing for me this year. So I don't know if if the town is holding meetings or if anybody else has a problem with that. But I'm also willing to consider going a little bit later in conjunction with another application on another night.
Yeah, Mr. Mullen and I already have a hearing on the 15th for Granite Avenue. I'm sure that's going to take up much of that evening.
Yeah.
I don't know about the other night that week. The school vacation week is fine with me, to the extent that matters to anyone.
School vacation week is completely open as of right now.
My kids are in college.
I mean, do you want
They
to
don't want to
say?
hang out with me anyway, so.
My granddaughter's in Vermont.
Do you want to say Tuesday the 21st?
That works for me.
Okay, any objections to the 21st? All right. No one's going to Aruba? All right.
I
That's yeah. Someday. All right. Well, then that's what we'll do. We'll see everybody back here on the 21st. And until then, we'll see everybody later.
Thank you very much.
Everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
thanks.